Good morning. Welcome to the King's Reports News Hour for the 16th year of Changi, the leap 6th month, and the 12th day of the heavenly calendar. And this is Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Changi, Kyung Moon. I'm sorry I have to look over at the calendar every time I say that. If I don't, I get it wrong sometimes. Still get it wrong sometimes. But anyway, today is the 12th day in the leap 6th month of the 16th year of Changi. Okay. Let's see. Let's see what's going on around the kingdom today. And right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, it is 65 degrees and mostly sunny, getting up to 79 today, mostly cloudy with a thunderstorm. And tonight, 63 for a low, partly to mostly cloudy with a couple of showers late. And in father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan province, in what is today North Korea, it is currently 79 and it is raining. And that rain will last for at least 60 minutes. Tonight, getting down to 71 degrees, cloudy with heavy showers. Watch for flooding. I hope they watch for that. And then tomorrow, high of 88, a shower in places in the morning, otherwise partly sunny, very warm and humid. At the Honeymoon Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, currently 59 and cloudy, 83 for a high today, partly sunny and humid. Smoke from wildfires in Canada can create reduced air quality. Tonight, 63 for a low, partly cloudy. Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, right now 69 and clear. Mostly sunny, high of 94 today. Tonight, clear and humid, 73. And then at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, currently 82 and partly cloudy. And then tonight, partly cloudy and warm and very humid, 79 for a low. And then tomorrow, 90 degrees for a high, a stray thunderstorm in the morning, otherwise cloudy and very humid, becoming breezy in the afternoon. And at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, currently 94 degrees and mostly cloudy, turning cloudy, warm and very humid tonight, 77. Tomorrow, hot, humid, cloudy in the morning, then some sun in the afternoon, 97 for a high. And then at Ilan in Taiwan, 64 degrees, right? Oh, I'm sorry, 84 degrees right now. No, not 64, that's for sure. Not in Ilan. 84 degrees for a high, overcast skies, 77 for a low tonight, 94 for a high tomorrow, partly sunny with a strong thunderstorm in spots in the afternoon. You know, it feels like in the Northern Hemisphere, we've worked our way through the worst of it, at least for now. I don't know. maybe we'll get hit with a really severe heat event in September. I don't know, but anyway, for now we seem to have gotten over the hump. Okay. All right, let's see here. We are in Father's Words. We are in the book on True Family. I'm in the Cheonseonggyeong book on True Family, chapter 6, section 8. So Father says, when is this here? This is, okay, there's no date here. This is from the book, Blessed Families and the Ideal Kingdom of Heaven, page 378. It says, and he says here, Father says, everyone, do you know about the 3 points? The 3 points, the 3 points, 3 points as in, not 3 points as in 3 out of 10, but 3 points as in the triangle. It's got 3 points, right? 3 points. So the point where these 3 points can become one is the position where God, Adam, and Eve are one. We need to be very, very careful about Father's use of the word position, right? Position. Position is something and something almost substantial, it would seem, because and it's different from status. Okay, position and status are different. Kyok or kyokwi is translated as status, and 입장 is chadi. Well, I'm sorry. In this case is chadi, not 입장, but chadi. We're translating as a position. Anyway, let's continue forward. The place or the place where Adam and Eve, where God, Adam and Eve are able to become one, is the place where their mind and body are one. Okay. Okay, yes. Praise God. All right. So this is Father's actually explaining the Trinity as it was originally intended. Okay. Made a mistake here. when Father spoke in Los Angeles in during the Seven City Tour, I believe 1972 or three. I have to go back and check. But anyway, he explained there very explicitly about the Trinity, and he mentioned there. I don't have the exact text in front of me, but he mentioned there that if the fall had not occurred, people would not be talking about the Holy Spirit. Or they would be, or actually, that's not exactly what he said. He said if the fall had not occurred, people would only be talking about God, Adam, and Eve. That's all that people would be talking about. Well, by implication, then, right, people would not be talking about the Holy Spirit. And uh, so it's my understanding that in the context of Father's teaching, the Holy Spirit is uh, came into our vocabulary, came into our consciousness as a result of the fact that Jesus was not able to marry, but resurrected successfully. That there was this victory on the cross. He resurrected, but in order to provide a way for spiritual salvation, for spiritual rebirth to those who believed in him, he needed a female partner, someone in the female position to him. And this is when the Holy Spirit. This is when the Holy Spirit came into our consciousness. Not that it came about them, but when it came into our consciousness. I had an argument one time, or a discussion, I guess, with someone one time about where the Bible in First Genesis mentions the Spirit of God hovering above the earth, and whether this was the Holy Spirit. And my point was that it was not. That this was the Spirit of God, as it says, the Spirit of God. Anyway, I think those kinds of discussions are interesting to have, and I'm not giving you a conclusion. I'm just giving you something to chew on, I suppose, and you can chew on it and spit it out whatever you want. Here, I'm looking at Genesis 1, 2, right? Yes. Yes. Well, let me read from Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's Genesis 1. And then in Genesis 1:1, that is 1:1, and then 1:2, for chapter 1, verse 2, he says, now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So anyway, you can chew on that. Okay. All right. Let's see here what is going on. And, well, the sort of the we're sort of finding ourselves getting further and further into a kind of a brinksmanship between President Trump and President Putin, unfortunately, and that's a very dangerous place to be. As you know, Medvedev, the former president, sort of implied the use of nuclear weapons in response to if President Trump imposes tariffs as a result of Russia ignoring his deadline this coming Friday to end the hostilities in Ukraine. Medvedev said that in response to Trump. But then Trump said, "Well, okay, then I just moved two nuclear or two new submarines closer to Russia," implying, of course, or I think everyone assumes that he was implying that these were nuclear armed submarines. And then now, in response to that, we see that Russia is now abandoning a treaty that was actually dead anyway, but still it is an important sort of step forward in the and the brinksmanship that we have here. In a major escalation of global nuclear tensions, Russia has announced it will no longer adhere to self-imposed restrictions on the deployment of intermediate and short-range missiles. And I don't know if these are, I don't think these are nuclear. I'm not sure. Well, let's see if it explains this further in the article. The decision follows what Moscow claims is the de facto deployment of US-made missile systems near Russian borders and across the Asia-Pacific, moves that Moscow says violate the spirit of the defunct INF Treaty. Moscow's official statement and comments supportive of former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev came in the wake of President Donald Trump's announcement Friday that he'd ordered 2 nuclear-armed submarines to take up positions closer to Russia. In a statement released Monday, the Russian Foreign Ministry declared that the conditions justifying Moscow's unilateral moratorium no longer exist, citing a broad buildup of Western missile capabilities that pose what it calls a direct strategic threat to the security of our country. This is a new reality that all our opponents will have to reckon with, said Medvedev, deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, in a post on the social media platform X. He described the move as a result of NATO countries' anti-Russian policy and warned that further steps would follow. Kremlin's shift comes just a week after Trump ordered the forward movement of 2 U.S. nuclear-capable missile units into Allied territory in Eastern Europe. So 2 U.S. nuclear-capable missile units into Allied territory in Eastern Europe in what Washington describes as a strategic deterrence adjustment. So this is not the submarines we're not talking about. These are land-based missiles, obviously, and they're now in somewhere in Eastern Europe, and I'm sure they're in a secret location. While U.S. officials have not officially confirmed the missile types or precise locations, several reports indicate that the repositioning includes systems with capabilities falling under the 500 to 5,500 kilometer range, once banned under the now defunct INF Treaty. Signed in 1987 between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty prohibited ground-based missiles with ranges of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. The U.S. withdrew from the treaty in 2019, citing repeated Russian violations claiming claims Moscow has denied. So 2019 would be, of course, President Trump's first term. His first term was from 2017 to 2021. So he withdrew from the treaty in 2019. Since then, Russia has maintained a unilateral moratorium contingent upon Washington and its allies refraining from deploying such systems. That posture has now officially ended. In its lengthy Monday statement, the Russian Foreign Ministry accused the United States and NATO of staging provocative missile deployments under the cover of military exercises. The ministry cited the transfer of mobile Mk-70 launchers to Denmark for use in NATO drills and the delivery of the Typhoon missile system to the Philippines and Australia in recent months. And perhaps the most alarming example, Moscow pointed to the U.S. Army's deployment of the Dark Eagle hypersonic missile system during the July Talisman Sabre military exercises in Australia. The Foreign Ministry also highlighted the firing of U.S.-made precision strike missiles from the Republic of Palau, that would be in the Pacific, and their integration into HIMARS and M270 platforms, systems now present in Ukraine, Germany, and several Asia-Pacific allies. These U.S. and allied actions taken together result in the buildup of destabilizing missile potentials in regions adjacent to Russia, the ministry said. This development has serious negative implications for regional and global stability and dangerously escalates tensions between nuclear powers. In a stark warning, the ministry said that decisions on the specific parameters of response measures will be made by Russia's leadership following an interagency analysis. Though no details have yet emerged on where and when Russian missiles might be deployed, analysts expect movement in Kaliningrad, the Black Sea region, and potentially within Russian bases abroad. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov reaffirmed earlier warnings that Russia would act if NATO crossed red lines, telling TASS that Russia reserves the right to deploy intermediate and short-range missiles near its borders in response to growing provocations. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov added in an interview with RIA Novosti that the end of the moratorium was a logical and inevitable step, accusing Western capitals of failing to appreciate Moscow's restraint. In its final statement, the Russian Foreign Ministry lamented that its earlier calls for a reciprocal moratorium were rejected and replaced with concrete actions aimed at achieving permanent U.S. missile presence near Russia. The ministry also emphasized that serial production of U.S. systems previously banned by the INF is already underway. Russia-U.S. tensions have been ramping up for months, with one major reason being Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and Russian President Vladimir Putin's refusal to be pinned down on talks concerning peace or a truce. Through the conflict, the U.S. has led the charge in imposing severe sanctions on Russia, targeting its economy, key individuals, and important sectors such as energy. Russia has also drawn U.S. fire over cyber attacks and information warfare, as well as allegations of Russian interference in American elections. Meanwhile, Russia has continued to assert itself on the world stage. Who wrote this? Newsmax. Okay. On the world stage, supporting authoritarian regimes and influence operations in countries like Syria, Venezuela, and Belarus. This has put it at odds with the US and its allies. One other factor has to do with NATO. Since the Soviet Union's collapse, NATO has expanded eastward, incorporating former Eastern Bloc countries and Soviet republics. Russia sees this as a betrayal of earlier promises made by Western leaders, not to mention a threat to its strategic security. They just say that, okay, that Newsmax staff contributed to this report. That means that they took wire copy, probably AP and Reuters and stuff, and added some of their own stuff to it, right? So was there something in the beginning that told us no, it doesn't? Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, at least I don't think this is implying that there's a greater chance of nuclear exchange. However, it does mean that there is a greater chance of Russia attacking either Ukraine or perhaps a NATO country with a missile, and we will see. We will see what that is. But Russia has already been attacking Ukraine with missiles, and perhaps those have been within the 500-kilometer range or less than 500 kilometers, so not violating INF. So this might mean, I suppose, that Russia may be firing missiles from further back in their territory, at least 500 kilometers, which is about 300 miles, roughly 300 miles. So we'll have to see what this means. Perhaps someone will be able to explain to us better at some point what exactly this means. Okay. All right, so right. So we don't know exactly, I don't understand exactly right now how much of a escalation this actually represents. Is it largely symbolic, or is it something that is much more substantive? We'll have to wait and see for a explanation somewhere. I'm sure we'll get one before too long. Okay. Let's see. Also, President Trump is criticizing India for helping to fund the Ukraine war by purchasing Russian oil at a heavily discounted cost. And so I think he's going to be imposing a high tariff on India. Yeah, see what develops there. I want to do this story in the Epoch Times on how President Trump is reshaping foreign policy with tariff diplomacy. Trump is leveraging tariffs to broker peace, restructure global trade, and secure concessions from U.S. allies and rivals. And this is interesting, isn't it? For example, the India situation, or even Brazil, for example. He's imposing a high tariff on Brazil because he doesn't like the way that the Brazilian government is dealing with the former President Bolsonaro, who's a conservative and who is someone who President Trump has a great respect for. And so he says, okay, well, if you do that to him, and by the way, Bolsonaro now has been placed under house arrest by the Supreme Court. They're saying that, okay, well, if you're going to do that to Bolsonaro, then take that, sort of slapping a big tariff on their products and services coming into the United States. So yes, this is something new. This sort of tariff strategy, shall we say, using tariffs as a tool for all sorts of purposes, not just rebalancing trade, but also pursuing political goals and diplomatic goals. And India too. India is getting a higher tariff because President Trump sees them as helping to fund the Ukraine war. So let's take a look here at what's going on. This is by Emil Akan. Let's see who this is. Let's go to the end here and see who this is. Doesn't explain. Okay. All right. We'll assume that he's a good guy. Okay. All right. Okay, we don't know who he is, but anyway, we'll read his stuff here. In his second term, the President Donald Trump has reshaped U.S. foreign policy using tariffs not just as an economic leverage, but as a central tool of diplomacy. His administration has leveraged economic pressure to address global conflicts and secure concessions from other nations, marking one of the most significant shifts in foreign policy in decades. Well, not just decades, I think, but actually even, going back, I mean, this kind of stuff, when did this happen before? When did this happen? I don't know what precedent do we have in history. Maybe we do, but I don't know of one. Just months after taking office, Trump made clear his ambitions, stating that his second term would be very different from the first. The first time I had two things to do, run the country and survive. I had all these crooked guys. And the second time I run the country and the world, he told The Atlantic in an April interview. Trump has touted how Trump's tariff strategy, resulting in trade concessions from allies such as the European Union and South Korea, along with breakthroughs in conflicts, is evidence that the new foreign policy approach is delivering results. His trade threats have already helped end several conflicts, including the recent border skirmish between Thailand and Cambodia and the crisis between India and Pakistan. On June 27, Trump hosted the foreign ministers of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda to the White House as they signed a peace deal to end their 30-year war. Michael Walsh, senior fellow in the Africa program at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, said the White House has demonstrated that it can promote regional stability through economic incentives. Economic incentives, I love that. Yes, but what is the ball that we're keeping our eye on, right? The downfall of the Chinese Communist Party, right? And can tariffs bring down the Chinese Communist Party? Perhaps. But because the Chinese economy is so big, President Trump is treading very lightly there, and even sometimes seeming to give concessions to China. But if Russia does not stop bombing Ukraine by Friday this week, President Trump is threatening to put heavy tariffs on China. And that may be the ultimate sort of economic incentive that brings about peace. Perhaps we'll have to wait and see. And if it doesn't, we'll see what happens to the Chinese Communist Party. They believe very strongly that if you can show countries that they have an economic incentive to not fight with one another and to work with one another and work with the United States, that you can resolve a lot of conflicts in the world. Walsh told the Epoch Times. Yes. And why wasn't this done before, do you suppose? Was it because um, the weapons industry, armaments industry, uh, had too strong of a hold on past presidents and past administrations? I don't know. I don't know. But I think that is an interesting question to ask. Walsh said Trump's approach in Africa, which prioritizes trade over aid, has been more effective than the strategy pursued by former administrations. The Trump administration and by the way, peace is is very good for economic development, right? So rather than throwing aid at countries, uh, forcing them to live in peace, forcing them sort of to live in peace with each other. Maybe that's going to help Africa develop more than it has. The Trump administration is continuing its engagement in Africa, now turning its attention to conflict in Sudan, which is often labeled the Forgotten War, in which an estimated 150,000 people have died, according to data reported by the Council on Foreign Relations. Although no breakthrough has been achieved so far, Walsh said Sudan and other parts of Africa remain a priority for U.S. peace efforts. And so this then is, who is this? Doesn't tell us who it is. Come on. You're supposed to tell us who the people are in the photograph. But instead, the photo caption is completely different. Oh, Epoch Times, come on, come on. This is not supposed to happen. Okay. You're supposed to tell us who's in the photograph. Anyway, let's go. So, in other words, we have no idea who these people are. Well, this is J.D. Vance, this is Rubio, but I want to know who this guy is and who this person is here, this woman here. She has some sort of a pin here, a U.S. pen there. I don't know. Anyway, come on. Frustrating. Anyway, most recently, Trump is pressuring China and India to stop purchasing sanctioned Russian oil as part of his effort to weaken the Kremlin and end its war in Ukraine. On August 1, Trump took to Truth Social to criticize Moscow over the rising death toll in both Russia and Ukraine. This is a war that should have never happened, he wrote. I'm just here to see if I can stop it. The Trump administration is leveraging tariffs in negotiations with China and India to isolate Russia, according to Chris Tang, a professor at UCLA's Anderson School of Management, who described the development as a very interesting dynamic. If the strategy succeeds, it could drive Russia into economic collapse, he told the Epoch Times. Last month, Trump also targeted the BRICS alliance, warning against their efforts to challenge the US dollar's global dominance. Any country aligning themselves with the anti-American policies of BRICS will be charged an additional 10% tariff. There will be no exceptions to this policy, he stated in Truth Social. Yeah, so basically, President Trump is saying, hey, you know what? We're the biggest and meanest country in the world, and we're going to start acting like it. So as long as he's doing this for righteous ends, I think we're okay with it. I'm okay with it, and I think when I say we, I think God is okay with it. True parents are okay with it, as long as he's doing it for righteous ends. Obviously, he cannot go into the dark side, and in the future, president might do that, might take this strategy over to the dark side, and that would be unfortunate. In February, just weeks into his second term, Trump imposed 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico and added a 10% levy on Chinese imports to pressure these countries to address fentanyl trafficking. But as I say, demand side, come on now, got to do something for the demand side. Most recently, he threatened Brazil with a 50% tariff on its exports to the United States, sharing on Truth Social a letter to Brazilian President Lula. In the letter, Trump accused Brazil of becoming an international disgrace due to the ongoing trial of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, a close Trump ally. Trump's tariff strategy is already showing results. In June, Canada backed off its plan to implement a 3% digital service tax on large tech firms after Trump halted trade talks and threatened to impose higher tariffs on Canadian imports. The U.S. government has collected more than $150 billion in tariff revenue over the past 6 months, according to the White House. The Congressional Budget Office in June projected that figure could grow to $2.8 trillion over the next decade. Well, they always do this thing, over the next decade. But I mean, come on, we're going to have how many presidents over the next decade? 3, right? We'll have President Trump, and then so in the next 4 years, then maybe J.D. Vance the next 4 years after that. And who knows what will happen after Vance. Keith Krach, who served as Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment in the first Trump administration, said Trump is using tariffs as a broader strategy to rewire global trade and secure America's dominance on the world stage. President Trump has always viewed tariffs as a strategic tool, Krach told the Epoch Times. In his first term, he used them like a scalpel, targeting steel, aluminum, and specific trade gaps. Now, tariffs are the linchpin of his economic statecraft. Just sort of as an aside here, I was watching, I think, a video earlier today on how President Trump is trying to deal with the homeless situation. And sort of trying to use money or to clean that up. And I don't know how that's going to go. But also there, too, I was talking about, the fentanyl, we have to deal with the demand side by strengthening the family, but also the homeless situation as well. It's important that we strengthen the family. The federal government can do many things to strengthen the family, namely stop doing things that weaken the family, right? Such as encouraging women to get rid of their husbands in order to get more in terms of welfare. And here, then, also President Trump is using money to try and control state policies as well, saying that any state that boycotts Israel is going to suffer economically in terms of the relationship with the federal government. So this is the kind of thing that we do not want to happen in the Chernihiv. This is the sort of wielding that sort of a centralized power is not something that we want to see in the Chernihiv, and I'm pretty sure we will not see it in the Chernihiv Constitution because the federal government will be much, much smaller, significantly smaller than it is now. But for now, anyway, President Trump is using this for righteous purpose, and so for now, we can say it's okay for him to be doing this, but in the future, this same strategy could be used for very nefarious purposes. Many analysts argue that the strength of Trump's tariff strategy stems from America's economic and military power. As the world's largest economy and consumer market, the United States can exert pressure in a way that others cannot. This leverage was evident in recent negotiations with the European Union. While Trump initially proposed a 30% tariff, the EU ultimately agreed to a 15% rate, still a sharp rise from the previous average of 4.8%, according to the World Trade Organization data. The White House said the new tariffs on European goods would generate tens of billions of dollars in revenue annually. In addition, the bloc agreed to invest $600 billion in the United States over the course of Trump's term and purchase $700 billion of energy exports over 3 years. And here's Ursula von der Leyen. Oh, look. This is the caption that should have been in the other photograph. They got the captions mixed up. Here, look at what it says. U.S. President Donald Trump holds a photo as he meets with Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Rwanda. Does she look like she's from Rwanda? No, she doesn't, does she? Oh, Epic Times, come on, get it together. All right. Uh, okay, so that was Rwanda and Congo before. All right. Okay. Boy, I tell you, I don't know. You know, the quality of journalism, just the technical quality, right? I'm not talking about bias and stuff like that, but this kind of thing, this is just an inexcusable technical uh, unforced error, right? And these seem to be happening far more often than they used to. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but the captions are mixed up here. They're opposite. Uh, Maybe I'll write to Epic Times and tell them to get their act together. Anyway, Besant called it the deal of the century. What are we talking about here? Oh yeah, Ursula von der Leyen called it a huge deal. Okay. So it will bring stability, it will bring predictability. That's very important for businesses on both sides of the Atlantic, von der Leyen said. However, some other European leaders reacted strongly against the deal. Okay, we know about that. Japan similarly agreed to a 15% tariff and pledged $550 billion investment in the US economy, and the United States set to receive 90% of the profits from those projects. Under the latest deal with South Korea, exports to the United States will face a 15% tariff, while US goods entering South Korea will be exempt from any tariffs. In addition, Seoul committed to investing $350 billion in the United States and purchasing $100 billion worth of American liquefied natural gas, crude oil, and coal. But now South Korea is saying that actually most of this, the vast majority of this 350 billion, is not going to be investment in equity, but it's going to be sort of guarantees by the Import-Export Bank and stuff like that. So that's how they're explaining it to their people, their constituents in South Korea. I don't know what it's actually going to be. There are okay, dozens of others like this. Okay. So we'll see how this all works out. Let's see what the caption of this is. Okay, this seems to be all right. Okay. Keith Hassett walked toward the West Wing of the White House on June 30, 2025. All right. Okay, they got that one right. And tariffs reshape supply chains. Trump has long championed tariffs to revive American manufacturing and boost domestic jobs. But according to Tang, reshoring jobs to the country remains difficult after decades of industrial decline, a shortage of skilled labor, and ongoing infrastructure and regulatory hurdles. And that's going to be a factor of the U.S. education system as well. Yeah. Some companies are relocating production to the United States to avoid tariffs and serve the domestic market. However, many still depend on cheaper overseas labor for international sales, creating a split in global supply chains. For domestic consumption goods, a lot of companies will gradually produce more in the United States, Tang said. But for the international market, the United States still relies on emerging markets with lower labor costs. He cited Eli Lilly, that's a pharmaceutical company, as an example, noting the pharmaceutical giant plans to produce more of its weight loss drugs in the United States because the domestic market is the largest. It makes sense for the companies to produce here, Tang said. Industries such as pharmaceuticals and semiconductors are leading the reshoring trend due to their highly automated production processes, which reduce labor needs. Automakers such as Volkswagen are also ramping up their U.S. investment to avoid Trump's tariffs. Still, bringing entire automotive supply chains to America remains a challenge. So yes, if the U.S. is lacking in highly skilled labor, no problem. Just put in machines. I suppose that'll be the solution. So Trump still faces unresolved battles, including a new trade agreement with and an ongoing standoff with China over rare earth minerals. While Chinese rare earth shipments have surged in recent weeks, Beijing is still falling short of its commitments, according to Hassan. Okay. All right. I'm checking all of their photo captions now. Uncertainty remains. While Trump has secured a series of trade victories, questions remain about their long-term durability. Many of the tariff measures are based on executive authority and could be reversed by future administrations. Additionally, enforcement of major investment commitments by trading partners is still unclear. One example is Trump's trade deal with the EU, which includes a pledge from Brussels to purchase $750 billion in U.S. energy over 3 years. However, analysts are skeptical. In 2024, U.S. energy exports to the EU totaled $78.5 billion, far below what would be needed to meet the commitment. The bigger challenge, according to a recent report by investor and minerals researcher John Zadeh, is whether the United States can scale up exports to roughly $250 billion annually between 2025 and 2028. A critical limitation facing U.S. exporters isn't production capacity, but rather export infrastructure. He said, particularly for natural gas, the process of liquefaction and marine terminal loading creates bottlenecks that cannot be quickly overcome, regardless of how much gas is produced domestically. Von der Leyen backed the agreement, saying the EU would replace Russian gas and oil with significant purchase of U.S. LNG, oil, and nuclear fuels. The business leaders are also cautiously supportive of Trump's trade deals. The Business Roundtable, an association of more than 200 CEOs of America's leading companies, praised Trump's efforts to restore balance in trade and support U.S. manufacturing, but warned of risks. We are concerned that persistent high tariff rates will harm the U.S. economy, especially the manufacturing sector, the group said, urging continued negotiations to lower tariffs and non-trade barriers. Okay. Meanwhile, market reaction has been largely muted. Yes, investors have so far shrugged off concerns about the tariff's potential impact on U.S. economy and inflation. The S&P 500 has rebounded more than 25% since the April 8th low, suggesting that markets may have initially overreacted to the April 2nd unveiling of the tariffs. Yes. Well, we'll see. There's a lot of forecasting, economic forecasting, saying that the U.S. Stock markets are going to be in a very difficult situation in the next several weeks. Not financial advice, just pointing that out. You can look it up yourself and do your own research. But we'll see. But of course, I am most interested, and I think in terms of the provenance, we are most interested in what is going to happen to the Chinese Communist Party. How is the Chinese Communist Party going to be affected by this, especially come this Friday? And President Trump may do something that he's done many, many times, that is to extend the deadline. Says, okay, well, I'll give you till next week. Okay, I'll give you till next week. I'll give you till next week. But somewhere along the line, he has got to bring down the Chinese Communist Party. And that process is most likely going to be a very, very messy process that will affect the world economy in a very negative way, as we've already talked about. We'll see what happens with all that. All right, let's see what else is going on here. This is interesting. White House poised to fine banks that ask customers for politics. Wall Street Journal. I think it's been 3.5 years since PayPal restricted my account. They did not cancel my account now, so in their favor. I'm not allowed to receive money on PayPal. I'm not allowed to send money on PayPal. So what else is there to do on PayPal, right? Should I maybe try to get back onto PayPal? But I've been living 3.5 years without it, and I don't need it. I don't need it. PayPal, those guys. And I never got an explanation except, violating community standards or whatever. The usual non-explanation is all that I got. Anyway, so White House is poised to fine banks that ask customers for politics. Wall Street Journal. That is interesting. Okay, we'll see if that comes about. An ex-ABC reporter, few back Trump at legacy media. Well, is anybody surprised by that? I don't think so. All right, so let's see here. A grand jury to probe roots of Trump-Russia claims. Hey, come on, let's not get distracted, all right? Don't get distracted. We need to keep looking forward, not backward. And we need to keep looking at how to bring down the Chinese Communist Party. That's the real important thing. Rwanda reaches deal with U.S. to take in 250 migrants. And now we're going to have an order for the 2028 Olympics task force in Los Angeles. I don't know why anybody does the Olympics anymore. They're generally a money-losing operation. And in Los Angeles, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to the homeless situation? I guess just like that San Francisco did during Xi Jinping's visit a couple of years back, I guess Los Angeles is just going to sweep them all up and ship them off to, well, maybe San Francisco. Okay, and then tariff dividend floated for middle class. Well, they keep floating that story, giving us hope. Well, we'll see whether it actually happens. And Trump will raise tariffs on India for Russian oil deals. Yes. Cambodia to nominate Trump for Nobel Peace Prize. Okay. They're not going to give it to him. Spoiler alert. Okay. Those Nobel Peace Prize is done in which is it? It's done in Norway, right? I think it's done in Norway. Norway is not going to give the Nobel Peace Prize to Trump. All the other prizes are done in Sweden, I think, isn't that right? But the Peace Prize is done, only the Peace Prize is done in Norway. Or is it the other way around? But I think that's right. Let's see here. The Russiagate grand jury, again, don't get distracted. And accountability for Russia hoax. But people like to talk about accountability, sort of like lock her up or lock him up. But I think in a democratic system, we are a republic, but we're run on a democratic system. Accountability happens at the box office, and people don't vote for you. That's accountability. Okay, here, GOP failure over fleeing Dems. Okay. The Texas situation, like I said yesterday, if you want to be entertained, go ahead and look at that story. It's crazy. It happens. Yeah. Okay. Dershowitz proving Jack Smith intent to heavy burden. And that's what I'm saying. Jack Smith, of course, is the special prosecutor that went after President Trump. And a lot of money is going to be spent. A lot of lawyers are going to, make money to send their kids to Ivy League universities, and the result is doubtful. So right now, the Texas lawmakers are running around the country, anywhere but Texas, because they want to deny the Republicans a quorum in the legislature so that the Republicans cannot pass the laws required to have a new redistricting there. So, okay. But meanwhile, California is thinking of doing the same thing or similar thing. And here, Putin doubts potency of Trump's ultimatum to end the war. So it's unfortunate because now President Trump may have to actually do something to give credibility to his threat. Russian President Vladimir Putin is unlikely to bow to a sanctions ultimatum expiring this Friday from U.S. President Donald Trump and retains the goal of capturing 4 regions of Ukraine in their entirety, sources close to the Kremlin told later. So this is why I say I think it may come down to a phone call from Xi Jinping saying, yeah, I know, you want to stand up to Trump, and I certainly agree with that, but we cannot take these tariffs that he's going to put on us if you don't do what he says. So I'll take you out to dinner sometime. I'll owe you one, but you got to stop. You got to do what Trump says. That kind of phone call is what we need from Xi Jinping to Vladimir Putin. Now, the Trump envoy is going to go to Moscow tomorrow or the next day, right? Wednesday or Thursday, they said, and we'll see if he's able to convince Putin. And Fox News could face civil war as Murdoch's succession looms. That's interesting. And Trump says Khan is war and lies about everything. Yeah, we know that. She's an interesting figure. She's supposed to be leftist, right? And yet, on the especially on the cryptocurrency situation, she's defending the major banks, the mega banks, all the way. I mean, 100%. She's 100% in favor of the mega banks. I know. She's in cahoots with Jamie Dimon, and who's the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo and Citibank and all these others. And then she calls herself a progressive. So I don't know what's going on there. But I guess apparently her constituents are okay with that. Massachusetts, well, okay. Putin doubts. Okay, we already got that. So do they have the same story twice? Yes. Okay. Charlemagne. Okay. DOJ. Okay. And Israeli cabinet may order complete Gaza takeover. I think I predicted this at the beginning of that situation, soon after the October 7th incident, the year before last, that Israel was going to go in there and just take over Gaza. And I think that's basically what is happening now, or is likely to happen now. Right. And Health and Human Services finds millions enrolled in Obamacare and Medicaid. Okay. All right. Why millennials are trading big cities for small towns. That's a good thing. Okay. Hamas said October 7th led to a push for Palestinian state. So they're justifying their terrorist actions on October 7th, saying that, well, now it's look at what happened. Now we've got France, now we've got Canada, maybe we've got the UK probably supporting us for a Palestinian state. They say, and of course, President Trump has made very clear that he's completely opposed to the United States recognizing a Palestinian state. And meanwhile, Netanyahu is leaning towards seizing Gaza. So if Netanyahu does that, then, well, there's not going to be a Palestinian state, at least not that involves Gaza. If there is one, it will only involve the West Bank. All right. Okay. And this is interesting. U.S. mulls $15,000 bonds for some tourist visas. This is basically saying don't come, right? $15,000 bond is a lot. Some tourist and business visas under a new pilot program launching in 2 weeks, an effort that aims to crack down on visitors who overstay their visas. Okay, well, yeah, a bond, and so that maybe, it may be able to purchase the bond for a tenth of that, so maybe $1,500, but that's still a lot of money. And I guess you get most of that money back when you leave. There will be some fee, I'm sure. But somebody's going to make a lot of money selling those bonds. Could require could require, let's read this again. The United States could require up to $15,000 bonds for some tourist and business visas under a new pilot program launching in 2 weeks, a U.S. government notice said on Monday, an effort that aims to crack down on visitors who overstay their visas. So, well, I guess we'll find out 2 weeks from now whether they're actually going to do it or not. That is interesting. That is interesting. And most countries are pretty strict about overstaying visas. I've been here. I came here first to Korea. I came here last January, I suppose, and I entered the country on a 90-day stay, I guess, and then at some point I got a letter from the immigration people saying, "Okay, your 90 days is just about up, so come in and work something else out, or you got to leave." And so went in and worked something else out. And so now I have a much longer stay. I'm actually a legal resident here in Korea now. But yeah, they keep track of you, and it's a small country. It's pretty easy to keep track of people here. It's easy to keep track of people. The United States has very long land borders, whereas in Korea, of course, the borders are either just air or sea. There are no land borders. But also, Japan is pretty strict. And if you overstay your visa, then you pay a fine of so much per day, I think. Well, we'll see. We'll see if the United States can get its immigration system in order. That would be something. That would be something very, very useful, I think, to make sure that we're allowing people in. And the United States allows legal immigrants something to the tune of, what is it, 1 million a year or something like that. Let's do a quick search here. How many people entered the U.S. legally in 2024? Approximately 10 million people. There you go. See, in 2024. Let me show this to you. So the United States is not closing its doors by a long shot. In 2024, approximately 10,680,981. They say approximately, then they give it down to the one person. I'm sorry, I nitpick, don't I? But if you're going to give it down to the one person, then take out the word approximate. Exactly. 10,680,981 people have been encountered at U.S. borders under the Biden-Harris administration, according to that. Well, that's encountered. Okay, encountered legally. So I'm talking legally. Half of everyone that's here legally came. How many illegal? Well, I keep talking about illegal, don't they? Okay. How many immigrants came to the U.S. in 2022? Net immigration to the U.S. in 2022 was 2.6 million. Well, that's both legal and illegal. Carry on. Number of legal immigrants to U.S. every year. Let's look at this. This is a bit old, it's 2021, but still, okay. Since 1990. Okay. So looks like they have a graph here or something. All right. So 1991, immigrants obtained legal resident status, 1,800,000. Okay. So yeah, anyway. So millions of people come to the US legally. And if people are coming illegally, then it's best that they not do that. I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger's response when he was asked about this whole thing by a leftist media personality. saying, "How do you feel about this whole, people being kicked out and stuff like that?" And Schwarzenegger said, "Hey, I know I came to the United States with nothing, and this country welcomed me and everything like that. But he said I did it legally. I did everything legally." And he said, "If you're doing it illegally, you're not smart." Is what he said. And the media has not really publicized that clip for obvious reasons. Anyway, all right. Today's Tuesday. Tomorrow will be Wednesday, so we will continue our study of Father's words on the blood lineage tomorrow. And so join us then. And until then, God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.